Welcome, General Services Works Committee, Kiki Miller, Dan Gookin, at your pleasure. First up today, the Chief, Police Chief. Welcome.
I'm requesting that we declare a surplus and sell at auction 2 of our aging vehicles. The first one was over 21 years old and has a variety of issues that frankly cost too much for us to put any money into this vehicle given its current state. And the second one's only 18 years old and has fewer miles, but it's in such poor shape that we had to tow it back to the shop several times, and it cost too much to chase down the gremlins. It's more than the vehicle is frankly worth. So we're requesting to declare a surplus and sell both those vehicles at auction.
Any questions for the Chief? Kiki?
Pretty straightforward.
Dan? We'll look for a motion.
I would make a motion to recommend that council approve the declaration of 2 surplus vehicles and authorize the sale at auction.
Second.
Been moved and second. Any other thoughts, comments? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Chief. We put on that consent. Welcome, all the way from the Streets Department, City Engineer.
Thank you, council members, for having me before you today. This one's a little bit of a strange request, but I figured if I didn't run it through, a lot of questions would come up about us paying Dalton Gardens this amount of money. So back in the Government Way Hanley to Prairie portion, which started in I think about 2016 or 17, that project closed out in 2019. When the project started, we formed an MOU with the City of Dalton Gardens to put in sewer for them. Per the agreement, they paid us about just over $1 million, which was estimated for the construction of that sewer. At the end of the project, the sewer only cost about $775,000, leaving some money on the table to be returned back to Dalton Gardens. Well, LTAC, the Local Highway Technical Assistance Council, who was running the project, they had to get everything closed out by ITD, who oversees all the funds, and that usually takes a few years. Well, so when the project officially closed out in 2019, it wasn't until 2022 that ITD officially closed out the project, closed the books on it, and returned the money that was left over, which was short of what was owed back to the City of Dalton Gardens. And the way that, so I immediately went back to LTAC and said, okay, how could this happen? And they said it's just their policy that any non-participating money, as they call it, money that comes from the local jurisdictions, they don't keep it separate, whether it's for sewer or for roads or whatever. So their money was intermixed with our match money and paid for construction. So at the end of it, they had used some of that sewer money for the road construction. And since we were partners with Lakes Highway District and Hayden on this, we had an agreement with them as to who pays what portion of it. I had to go. Well, first, actually, backing up, I went back to LTAC and asked them, well, is there any more money that we can find for this? And they said no. So then I went to ITD and said, is there any more money out there that we can find for this? And they said no. I had talked to KMPO, who already found us extra money for the project, and their sources of funding were the same as what I was able to look for. So in the end, the City of Coeur d'Alene, Hayden, and Lakes Highway District had to give money back to Dalton Gardens. So ITD at the end of this project had refunded us $191,000 that was left over from construction, but it wasn't enough to cover the $244,000 that was owed back to the City of Dalton Gardens. Sorry if I'm making this super confusing, but it's a really confusing topic. So at the end, I had to go back to Lakes Highway District and Hayden and ask them to pay us extra money to pay back to Dalton Gardens to make them whole on their agreement, so they would get their $244,000 back. Hayden sent theirs directly to the City of Dalton Gardens instead of to us, but I called and talked to Dalton Gardens, and they understand that they're only going to get the portions from the City of Coeur d'Alene, Lakes Highway District, and the remaining funding that was left from the project of $191,000. So in the end, we will be cutting them a check for $233,000. Had this all been known from the beginning, we would have had the same obligation to pay them anyway. Well, we would have been paying towards the project at the time. But now that that money has been spent, we have to give it back to Dalton because they spent their money on the project. Is there any questions that can help clear up what I'm asking you, I guess?
Kiki, you got anything?
Dan, will you go first?
Sure. Thank you. So Chris, why wasn't the whole amount refunded to us then?
Which amount?
So we paid them $1 million. I'm gonna use big numbers here.
Yeah.
We paid them $1 million. It ended up costing $750.
Right,
So they owe us $250 back,
right.
right? Okay, where does Dalton Gardens come in then?
No, that's the other way around.
Well, yeah, so Dalton Gardens paid us $1 million.
Oh.
Which went to the project. It
Okay.
went into ITD's hands. So they had this $1 million, but they put it into the same account with all the construction money, not just for the sewer itself. So when they ran out of construction money, they started taking away from the sewer money as well. And now there is not enough money to pay back Dalton Gardens from the construction money. So I'm proposing that we take $26,000 thereabouts from impact fees from Quad 2, which has plenty of money in it to do that, combine it with Lakes Highway District's funding that they just sent us a couple weeks ago, $15,000, and then combine that with $191,000 that ITD returned to us back in 2022.
So I'm still a little confused. They paid us $1 million for a sewer.
Correct.
Okay, and what did the sewer actually cost?
$775,000 thereabouts.
Okay, so when they paid us the extra 250, round number, thousand, what did we do with it?
So the $1 million that they gave us at the beginning was based on an estimate of how much that sewer would cost.
Right.
So it was part of the agreement. They gave us the money or gave it to ITD, went into that project account. Then when the construction was actually over, they recalculated how much that sewer cost because it wasn't just the cost for the pipe. It was for the backfill, the pavement over it, and all those things that go along with a sewer replacement. When the project was finally done, they recalculated how much it actually costs, and it turned out it was much cheaper than they originally anticipated it would cost. So Dalton Gardens overpaid for the cost of the sewer. Now we are reimbursing them per our agreement to give them the money that was not spent. It just
So-
happened to be spent on something else.
The confusing part for me is that,
Yeah.
so they're paying for a sewer, but putting in a sewer also involves tearing up a street. So you're saying that they're not going to pay the part of tearing up the street part. I don't understand where there's a break between the sewer project, and I know there was a road project too.
Right.
So I think there's two different projects going on at the same time.
Correct.
So we took all their money and we ended up spending it, some of their money on the street. That's what we don't want to say out loud.
Well, that is what happened. It wasn't us. It was LTAC that was managing the funds. We found out after the project was over that money was spent, and there wasn't enough left to reimburse Dalton Gardens for what they had contributed. And the cost of the sewer did factor in a trench width and then whatever was over it with curb, gutter, sidewalk, pavement, anything like that. So it was
Okay,
all
so
factored into it.
I understand it now. I don't know if you guys understand it, but I think I get what's going on.
I'm not sure about that. Chris, I feel like it is quite confusing, and I can see how these things go. The $1 million was paid to put a sewer in. It didn't cost that much money, so the difference LTAC decided to use to finish the project, but they should have not done that. They should have reimbursed it back to the cities because that's not what the agreement was for.
Right, right. And at the time, they would have had to say, hey, we're 50,000 or whatever short on this project, and then asked us for the money to finish the project out with that money kept aside, separated, going back to Dalton Gardens. But that's not how they explained that they manage the funds. They just put it all into the same pot together.
Okay, so everybody's money doesn't get delineated towards the line item that they actually contributed it for.
Correct, exactly.
And so then when they get to the end of the day and they say, okay, we're over or under, under on sewer, over on asphalt, who knows? They just take it and redistribute it
Right.
to another line item rather than actually go back to the people who were paying for it and ask if they can do that.
Correct.
That feels like,
It's created a lot of headache, but that's the way that it's panned out to be.
but it also feels like Dalton Gardens kind of ends up with a lot of other entities' money to finish their project without them having to put more into it? Or is it just, because I guess what I'm saying is if the change order would have happened that they go, okay, we're going to take this money and it ran over $1 million, then the other entities ended up paying that difference?
I believe the way the agreement was written, Dalton Gardens would have had to pay the overage on that. But since it was under, they're getting a reimbursement back to them for what wasn't spent.
Okay, I was trying to put it in there. So the LTAC is the general contractor and moving money around from bucket to bucket to finish the project. So the people who have to now balance the end of the agreement that's what we're doing, is
Right.
trying to say, okay, well, this was the MOU, so on paper, we have to balance this agreement.
Right, we're just trying to meet the conditions of our MOUs with the various agencies. So I was able to get that money from Lakes and Hayden, or Hayden sent theirs directly to Dalton. So by providing the city of Dalton Gardens with this $233,000, it will make the agreement whole. They will have received what they had agreed to.
And then, but we still are, the math I'm not connecting is we're still taking $26,000 out of our impact fees to
Correct.
reimburse them.
So had this, let's say if, for instance, if the sewer would have cost exactly $1,019,988 like they originally estimated, we would have had to find that $26,000 back in 2018 or 19 to finish this project, and it would have come from impact fees at the time.
Okay. So how does an MOU like that benefit us to pay for Dalton Sewer?
So we didn't actually pay for
Mike?
it. Well, Mike did come, just in case any questions come up on that, because there is a separate MOU between the city of Coeur d'Alene and Dalton Gardens for sewer service. They had to put the sewer in, but we're taking their sewer. Mike also has to charge cap fees whenever one of those businesses connects to city sewer. And
The
they have a
Dalton Gardens
timeline of when
businesses?
they, yeah, and they have a timeline dictated as to when they need to connect to city sewer. And that's at about 19%.
Yeah.
So
it's at
far.
19%, and it is our sewer.
So, Mike, go ahead and come on up. So,
I just wanted to let you know that
Yes.
they built it and it's servicing their properties, but the city owns that sewer pipe in the ground right now.
okay,
We own that, and it also can service properties on the west. Yeah, thanks.
okay. So then there isn't, okay, that's where I was trying to see where the connection for other jurisdictions might be, but it's city sewer that serves Dalton.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So the cap fees will reimburse that impact fee budget eventually? No.
So cap fees are used, just for clarity, not part of this conversation necessarily, but the cap fees are going to be, they will be assessed. They were charged a separate LID, they meaning the property owners, were charged an LID by Dalton Gardens. And those cap fees that will be charged on top of that, in case anybody from Dalton Gardens is listening to this, those cap fees will be charged on top of that, and that's their buy-in to the rest of the system, the treatment plan, all the pipes, all the everything else. It's
Okay.
their buy-in to the rest of the system.
Sorry, it's like, that gets a little,
I get it.
it's like three-layer chest there. Okay. I think I get it.
Couple questions.
Yeah.
Our attorney, so LTAC doesn't have any responsibility or obligation to pay us for that. Is that my impression?
Well, they ran the whole project, and the total project came in, what, 191,000 under, and that's what they're sending.
244,000. Oh, yes, 191,000, yes.
So LTAC reimbursed us,
Okay.
the city, for the 191, but unfortunately, everything else other than the Dalton sewer cost more than they projected. So we would have had to pay the 26,000 earlier if they had segregated those funds. They would have taken the million for Dalton Gardens, paid the 775 that cost to build it, then they could have reimbursed Dalton Gardens for that. But then the rest of the project cost more. They would have come to us and Lakes Highway District and City of Hayden to ask for more money to complete the project.
Thank you. Troy, so what would we learn from this? Would we do it the same way? I mean, we try and help each other in different parts of the city and stuff. Is this something we learned, or is it just the norm?
This was actually a good partnership,
what I
because
thought.
building that roadway was not all in the city of Coeur d'Alene. And in the event that we needed the width that took place, we needed a Dalton Gardens partner in case there was problems with land acquisition. So to get the dollars and get that improved, we partnered up with Dalton Gardens.
Right.
As a council, you said, yes, it's worthy of having that partner in case we have to go after some land that's not in the city, and we'll do the sewering. And so I guess it's all about the accounting. If the person that has the money controls the money, you now get to make a decision to take care of it. Otherwise, we would have taken care of this as staff way back when it was built. So they were holding dollars. We did the accounting. This city engineer challenged the accounting more than once, and we attempted to show the partnership. But at the end, you got a road built, a lot of grant dollars, and we can help Dalton in the future should they have more sewering take place. So a long answer, yes, we would learn. We would probably slightly do it differently, but unfortunately, we don't control LTAC.
Got it. That help?
Oh, I get it. I mean, it's weird, but I think the bottom line is just what Troy said, which is that LTAC is not responsible for doing the accounting to make sure that everything lines up in a separate column. They just looked at it as a project. So it makes sense, and it works. It's just, I think we definitely want to put this on the consent calendar, or we're going to have a 4-hour meeting again. So I would make a motion to recommend that council approve the refund of sanitary sewer funding to the city of Dalton Gardens and put it on the consent calendar.
I would second that and add that I think there were a lot of moving parts to this, that we forget about that widening and all of the negotiations with property owners, and that all of these pieces had been going on for years and years and years to get this together. So I appreciate you reminding us that it is a good partnership, and you don't have a crystal ball to see how it's going to end up in the end. So this is the adjustment to fix that. So having said that,
All right, Chris, thanks for fighting all that time, too. We appreciate your perspective on that.
Yeah, seriously, a lot of work. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moving on.
Thank you.
Do you have anyone else to explain it to? I mean, are we done?
I hope not. It's been a lot of explanation so far.
All right.
You did good. All right, personnel rules. Melissa Tosi, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I just have a couple different personnel rule amendments today. The first one being the unpaid leave of absence rule. This is a summary of the entire rule here on one slide. There's really only two main changes. It is an entire rewrite, but there's just two main changes with the rule. The first, this A, the request, this is adding it to the rule. The request is new, and it really is just for the employee to give the department head a more explanation in writing to explain the reason for the leave, the length of the leave requested, why it's necessary, and any other applicable information that would be helpful in making a final determination on the request, including medical documentation if available or requested. unpaid leave is not a right, but is granted only in extraordinary circumstances upon showing of good cause. Unpaid leave may be denied if coverage for the employee's work duties and responsibilities is not reasonably practicable. So we added that for the department head, for the employee to add additional information. So the only other change to this rule is under this B section, the duration of unpaid leave of absence. So currently, it's listed as 1 week is the department head's prerogative to approve that length of leave. So that stays as is. And then the extended unpaid leave, that goes to the HR director, and that is up to 12 weeks. And generally that, a lot of time runs with family medical leave, which is a federal benefit. So that goes to the HR director. So this next beyond 12 weeks, this is the change. And currently, the way that it's listed in the personnel rules is that an unpaid leave of absence of 12 calendar weeks or more must be approved in writing by the city council. So the proposed change is stated as the city administrator may grant unpaid leave for more than 12 weeks. The city administrator shall confer with the employee's department head and the HR director prior to making a determination. The HR director will provide the employee a written response to the employee's request. So those are the two main changes to this rule. So the proposed amendments to this rule have been discussed by the executive team and posted for 10 days per the personal rules requirements. They were sent to all three employee groups, LCA, the Police Association, and the Fire Union, and there were no concerns mentioned by any of those groups. Happy to stand for any questions.
All right. Keith, got anything?
I just had one question, and I was looking at the benefits package, but I didn't see anything in here that addressed whether this was concurrent unpaid leave. In other words, if a person exhausted all of their leave, and then they came and requested unpaid leave, and then they came back to work, can they come back and request unpaid leave again in the same year?
They could, yes, there's nothing in this rule that says that they, so,
I guess where I was going is that in the return to work, it said failure to return to work may be treated as, so would it fall under the return to work? In other words, I returned to work, but now I want to leave again? Then
Oh.
would it fall under the return to work clause is all I was wondering if that had been considered.
yeah. So I think that under approving this initial unpaid leave, whatever the original amount of leave that they would request, if at that point you did not return, if you didn't return, you could be terminated from not returning based on what you originally asked for.
I just, I only bring that up. I had a friend who owns a business that is just going through some of these things and had said that after COVID, there's been people who, it's hard to find people.
Yeah.
And then when they have someone on leave, they retain that position for the person.
Yeah.
So they're, then the person comes back and then 2 weeks later says, well, I need unpaid leave again.
Yeah.
And then they're 9 months out now with the same position not being able to be refilled. So I was just pondering if that's been considered and how that could affect the city as a whole.
Our employees, we do have employees that get into an unpaid leave of absence status. Newer employees that haven't had a chance to really get into, haven't had a chance to really get a lot of leave banked up. But generally, our employees, since we don't have paid time off, we don't have a PTO policy, we have separate vacation leave, we have separate sick leave, we have separate comp time leave if an employee doesn't get paid overtime and they accrue comp time. So generally, our employees have a lot of time off. We have very, very little unpaid leave. So the employees that fall under an unpaid leave of absence, they might be a newer employee that we did run into some situations with COVID that they were a newer employee, and based on some of our policies at that time, that we were requiring employees to not come into work because of some of the situations that they either had sickness at home or they had symptoms. They were running into, they didn't have enough leave. So we did have some unpaid leave situations, but generally our employees have a lot of leave. I have been an employee for quite a while, and we have never had an employee request beyond 12 weeks since I've been here. So it's never happened that I know of. So we're not talking about something that is happening often.
We can address that if it ever comes up.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Mr. Kuchen.
So we're just doing Rule 11 first. So in Rule 11, the original one, it said that I lost it. The request must be approved in writing and given to the city council. Oh, there it is. It's the second line. Unpaid leave of absence of 12 calendar weeks or more must be approved in writing by the city council. So when was that set in stone?
I went back and it's been at least 24 years. I don't have a copy of the personnel rules that go back prior to 2000. See. 1999. Yeah, 1999. I don't have a copy prior to that. But I also know that there's never been a request to council. I did ask, there are times that ICRIMP will review policy for me. It's nice to have a separate perspective on policy. They do write policy too. And since this isn't a frequently used policy, I asked them their perspective, and they did recommend that council was taken out of this just because it's odd to have council in a approval process with leave, and it's not even really a benefit. The way it's written now, it is an approval of unpaid leave. It's not even a paid benefit. And I think your question at the last council meeting, Councilman Kuchen, was, could it go to executive session? And I asked ICRIMP about that. And they did feel that you could get it into executive session under Title 74 under the Records Exemption Act. So it could get in executive session under that if you wanted to keep it under a council approval process.
Thank you.
Anything else for you?
I'm done on 11.
You want me to move to the next rule? Okay. So Rule 27 is our FLSA exempt employees, and this really is just adding the wording to the exempt employees for the deputy fire chiefs. All these benefits that are being added into the exempt rule are already approved by council, but they were being, the deputy fire chiefs were being covered under a MOU prior to this, and the deputy fire chiefs have agreed not to continue the MOU anymore and to be covered under the personnel rules. So I have taken the benefits that are in that MOU and I'm just pulling them into the personnel rules. So these benefits have already been approved by council, but the wording needs to be pulled into the personnel rules. So the sick leave option 2, the deputy fire chiefs, it is different than the current exempt employee language in that rule now. So they have a higher benefit, which they are paid at 41% of their banked hours at retirement. So I'm adding that language. And then quite a few years ago, the fire union opted out of Social Security. And so the city pays that into their PERSI choice plan, and they match that at 1% of their own contribution. So I've added that into their, into the personnel rules. And then the final benefit was the administrative on-call compensation, with which council approved on December 20th at the council meeting. And this is the wording that addresses that. The fire chief will create the quarterly on-call schedule for the deputy fire chiefs throughout the year, compensating them for the 132 hours, recognizing that on-call service. And they will be paid for that in November of each year for the preceding hours of that calendar year. It is approximately $8,000 per deputy fire chief. And that will give administration a chance to budget that into the next fiscal year, because we won't have to pay for that until next fiscal year. So again, happy to stand for any questions.
Dan?
Nope.
Got anything, Keek?
Nope, makes sense. So I would make a motion to approve amendments to Personnel Rule 11, unpaid leave of absence, and Personnel Rule 27, FLSA exempt employees as presented.
Well, I'm okay with 27. I'm not okay with 11. I just don't think there's any reason to cut council out, especially since it'll probably never change and it'll never happen. I think we should still maintain whatever authority we have and not have it taken from us.
So we can put it on the agenda and have council.
Well, if you want to split it up, we can go ahead and pass Rule 27, which I don't have an issue with.
What do you think, Rand? Easier to
That's,
break it, leave it
Up
together?
to you.
You, Mel?
Well, the only other thing to mention about the language of the request is generally if it's going to be past the 12 weeks, it is going to be probably a medical reason. So it's going to be information that's going to be highly sensitive to probably some medical situation. So that was one of the reasons that as I read through so when I came back and I rewrote the rule, one of the reasons I rewrote it is because when we went through some of the COVID situations and we had some unpaid leave, there were some questions on, do I have to utilize all my leave before I go into an unpaid leave status? That was really why I rewrote the rule, just to kind of clarify unpaid leave in general. And that is what made me go into the rule to rewrite it to begin with. It had nothing to do with the getting to over 12 weeks to begin with. Once I started to rewrite it, I thought, if I ever had someone come to me and had a request to get, if I had an unpaid leave request beyond 12 weeks, it's probably going to be medically related. I'm not sure that employee would be comfortable going to council to begin with, and I'm not sure you would want to know that anyways. I'm not sure it would be a request that would be within your purview anyways. So that was the only reason I was changing it.
So for discussion, Dan, I'm thinking a couple things here. One is that this is a 24-year-old rule, in that their departments may have been smaller. Maybe council was more involved in some of the unique circumstances that happened there. But I think when Melissa said that this has never happened since she's been here, I am just wondering what the benefit you would see of having council be involved, of getting into this really unique situation with, like what you said, is somebody's specific it's obviously gone through all of the iterations of all their leave and everything. So they are either in a situation like my friend, where they have somebody who said, well, I've figured out a way to preserve my job while I'm looking for another one. But, you know, what would the benefit of council being involved with this be in your mind?
We don't know the answer to that question unless we can review the wisdom of why council was involved in the first place.
And we have no history onto. we don't
Yeah,
have
and
any
I
old-timers.
don't know why it was written that way to begin with, and that was one of the reasons I asked ICRIM, what would your recommendation be if I said, if this should go to council for approval, or should this be more of an internal approval process with our city administrator and staying with a department head? What would you recommend? And that was, they said that they felt it should stay with the city administrator.
And I think a lot of things used to go to council that now we've kind of said, you know, we'll deal with them on consent, or we'll deal with them, you know, what was it, beer and wine licenses?
Well,
that we
consent
kinda
item
knew.
is still going to us.
Right, but I kind of feel like there were things that as we progress and evolve and things change, I just wondered if there was something else. If it's just because we don't know why council did it before, but it doesn't make sense now, it doesn't make sense for me to keep it that way, so.
Basically, I haven't been sold on it.
And
Let me ask you, let's just break it
Either way.
apart. Let's just do Rule 11 and then hopefully put that on the consent and then bring this forward. You're good with that?
I would be good with that.
All
And
right.
Put Rule 27 on consent would be fine with me.
27 on consent?
Yeah, and then
Okay.
bring 11 forward again.
Okay, got it.
so I'll withdraw my motion if you want to make a new one to,
Make me do the work, sure. No, it's my problem, so I will do the work. Yeah, let's go ahead and approve the amendment to Personnel Rule 27, FLSA exempt employees as presented, and set it on the consent calendar.
second.
All right. Dan, second. Other thoughts, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And then a second motion would be to pass along or set the presentation for Personnel Rule 11 to council on an agenda item.
Do we need a motion for that?
That was it, wasn't
Probably
it?
not.
No.
I thought just a
Wanna
rep.
kick it out? Okay.
Yeah, just a
You can just move
recommendation.
that? Okay,
Just
thank
goes
you.
upstairs.
All right. Were you able to get that? You're good, all right. All right, last item. Welcome, Troy.
Thank you, council members. Good afternoon. I bring before you a update to the police captain's memorandum of understanding. This has been in place for approximately 19 years. This is for the current fiscal year. It covers our two police captains. They are in agreement with this. It is a one-year term. In this, we have changed the minimum and maximum salary for those exempt personnel. That includes the same percentage increase that the Police Association received through negotiations and is in their contract. This is memorializing that, and the back wages based on our October 1 beginning fiscal year have been paid to the captains as per information shared to council. A 1 year so that we have an opportunity to look at this again in another year would be my follow-up to that question, since a goal of this administrator is to have those individuals in our personnel rules. I would stand for any questions you may have.
Go ahead.
No, I'm good.
You're good?
I think that's good that we brought this forward.
Yep, and we're looking at it again in a year.
Right. No questions. Well, you got off easy, didn't you?
Yes.
It'll come back to get you. All right, so I need a motion, please.
I would make a motion to recommend that council approve the police captain's memorandum of understanding for the term of October 1, 2022 through September 30, this year.
I will agree to that.
Been moved and seconded. Any other thoughts, comments? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And consent calendar for that, and look for adjourn. to move.
Motion to adjourn?
Adjourn.
Thanks. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much, you guys.